We are now introducing, Ray's looking at me. We're introducing Ray Poynter, who's going to be leading our Metaverse panel. He has alongside him, I'm going to let you introduce everyone. Ray, over to you.
So on my right, I have Jerome Sopocko. And then Betty Adamou, who you've seen already. And then
Alexandra Kuzmina from Nova at MMR.
And we're the panel today. Two of us were pre-selected, Betty and myself. The other two, Jerome and Alexandra, were selected because they were asking good questions today. So they didn't get very much warning at all. And we're going to have a type of sandwich. I won't describe what type of sandwich, but it starts off with the good bit, then it goes to the bad bit, and it comes back to the good bit. So asking my fellow panel members, what most interested you today or caught your eye or taught you something new? And we'll start with Jerome, but next time we'll start with Betty.
I've learned a lot. A lot of acronyms, some TLAs. I've learned a lot. It's something that I'm vaguely interested in. I was not sure there was an overlap with market research. I'm still not sure there is. But it was really interesting, and everybody was passionate about their subject. I had a great day.
So all talks were fantastic. I think it's fair to say. I think we all got something out of each and every one of them. I particularly enjoyed Josh's one because it felt like the most controversial, but also because I think talks that inspire you to think about the content in your context are often the ones that are really inspiring. So, okay, how would I work in this new world that Josh is proposing? So yeah, his really stood out for me.
Yeah, thank you so much for the spontaneous invite. I did enjoy today very much so. Let's move a little bit. So in my role, I work for the Nova Tech Innovation Team for global consumer and sensory research agency called MMR Research. And in my role, I am involved in exploring, interpreting, and implementing technology that makes a difference to our insights world, our industry, and helping CPG brands to engage with consumers in more meaningful ways and make the experience a bit more personable. And also make sure that we're not implementing technology as an industry for technology's sake. And I think the last kind of 12 or 24 months, there was no shortage of hype around the metaverse. And the recent months were kind of really proven sort of a bit of a backlash around that, with kind of Meta's publishing their earnings and stuff like that. So the backlash kind of is going mainstream now. So I agree that the last talk, not the last talk, Josh's talk was a bit controversial. I was probably the most controversial as well. I did enjoy the very last Jennifer's talk very much, and I think we're sort of at a point where someone on Twitter compared what we're currently in as a kind of a journey to the moon. So currently we're kind of in the Gemini era, and hopefully we'll kind of get through this middle phase at some point. You're reaching for the microphone. No.
Excellent, that's good. That's enough good stuff. I'm going to throw in my quick good stuff. I thought, start with Carl, several other people did it. It was about extended media, not virtual media. So I think if we learn one thing today, the metaverse, Web 3.0 is not about virtual media, at least not in isolation. So what seemed flawed or perhaps being slightly kind of over-optimistic today? So starting off with Betty.
So a book I read about 11 years ago called Reality is Broken by Times bestselling author Jane McGonigal. One of the things she speaks about in the first few pages is that we are, and were back then, experiencing a mass exodus into the virtual world. So people who would normally engage face-to-face are going into virtual spaces. And I think that maybe not in this conference, but another event, I would like us to talk about the reality of disconnecting, people who are living in virtual spaces, working in there, connecting, and people who are kind of living in the real world. And I don't know how many of you might feel this, particularly as parents, that disconnection you might have with maybe your own children, that they are really into spending time in virtual worlds all the time, and you don't really know how they're spending their time in there or who they are in those spaces. And I was talking to Andrew earlier because he's met my brother years ago. I'm about 14 years older than my brother, so we've got a different, obviously a massive generation gap. And he has grown up playing video games. He lives in a virtual world, and I feel disconnected from him. And so I think, aren't we disconnected from each other already? I think that's a conversation I'd like to explore more. Because although we're connecting in the virtual world, what about the people who are still living in the real world? And does that present problems with generation gaps and care in health and all those sorts of things? So I'll pass it down the line.
Yeah, so I suppose it's kind of bringing back to us as practitioners of market research is the engagement problem, and also how do we engage in the metaverse in meaningful ways, in different ways. So considering that the metaverse is VR and is AR as well. And I've recently done a study myself to test something called AI interviewer, so using augmented reality to see whether it compares with video, for example. So what I did was, instead of placing a pack or a product design in the metaverse, we actually placed a virtual kind of augmented version of a researcher introducing the topic, saying, hello, I'm so-and-so, and welcome to the project, please proceed. And we... a really kind of interesting findings that people enjoyed it, all the kind of engagement metrics went up. But I had to get to 100 completes, I have to sift through 1,380 people not clicking on the link.
Yeah, for me, the problems is first the glasses. You know, there was a kickback against Google Glasses because people didn't like being filmed. They didn't like having the kids filmed, and that's an obvious problem. And I don't know how it's going to go away. You know, like 3-4 years after, it's going to be the same story. The other thing is, like, well, if you go after 3 hours of Teams, my ears are hurting. I hate headphones. It's going to be worse with a helmet, even if it's properly ventilated. And there's a problem of motion sickness. You know, that apparently is getting better. But so there's mechanical problems. That means it's not going to be pleasant to be in a metaverse. The third problem is, like, if it's so going to be dependent on blockchain, then we have a problem, because there's not one blockchain. You know, I understand it's distributed, but you know, you need one blockchain to everybody to agree to use the same, and that's going to be a problem. Because, of course, we're in a capitalistic world where, we don't usually often cooperate. But
Thanks. And I'm going to follow up with 2 or 3 more negatives on there. The first one is, I really doubt that we're going to see a seamless, interoperable Web 3.0. I think we are heading much towards a balkanized online world with firewalls around lots of countries, where companies try to lock you in. And it was, I think, really interesting to hear the presentation about the digital wallets and the power change, because I do a lot of work in CX research. And if I do work for Ford, let's say, they want to know who is buying their car and what the attitudes are, and they do not want BMW to be able to access that information. They do not want you as a Ford customer to be able to sell that. And they are setting up the system. So with all of these democratizations, what would encourage the power, the government, the big companies, the client companies, to move towards enabling people? And I'm not sure there is something that's going to be doing that, enabling people. And I think we're going to see a lot more balkanization. That doesn't necessarily matter from a market research point of view. We just need to be flexible for which of those we move towards. I think it's really important that we look at liminal cases. That's things on the boundary. And the bollocks we heard from Josh was that stuff that was right on the boundary. So I think it's important that I hear that and to challenge it. But just one really angry moment I had there. We did not all work from home during the pandemic. 38% of the UK at some stage worked from home during the pandemic. Nurses, shop workers, policemen, bus drivers, the vast majority of people in this country worked in place. So yes, the gig economy is a wonderful way of transferring risk from companies to individuals and changing the thing in the benefit of companies. And for some people, like me, it's super. But it's a niche, and we should recognise that those things are a niche within the bigger picture. Yes.
I think the point...
Can we get a mic for that man?
You've got it.
I've got it. Turns out you can't speak, Mike.
Let me push back on that, only insofar as I feel that Josh is not here and somebody should defend him. And I'm quite happy to play that role. I think the point is, Ray, that you're missing... Oh, I hope he is. Because the point I think you're missing is that most people don't have the opportunity to work in the way that Josh was suggesting. And what Josh was suggesting was that the power needs to move from the employer in a centralized mode to the employee. And if you take, say, the cases that you mentioned, the people who will be employed in the future, who are definitely guaranteed jobs, are people like nurses, priests, teachers, anything that has a touchy-feely thing. But it's easy to miss the opportunities. Why is the National Health Service in such a dire strait? Because some centralised body, namely a Tory government, is organising it. If the nurses themselves were able to organise it, able to organise their own shifts so that they could manage when they pick the kids up from school, etc., etc., I think we'd have a much more productive organisation. And to do that, nurses should have the opportunity to work not only in a hospital, like Guy's Hospital, but at the local clinic, at the doctors, and give those opportunities. And that really, I think, is what Josh was going to. Is a fundamental structural change that could be facilitated in the world of work and many other places by thinking differently.
Thank you, Mike and Josh. Okay, so we're still in the middle part of the sandwich. And we're going to start with Alexandra this time. So what problems do you foresee in implementing the sorts of things we've seen today?
Thank you. Well, I suppose engagement is one thing and probably one of the most important thing. And we've seen that only 10% in the UK have actually considered themselves as having tried that. And I suppose there are a lot of problems, kind of structural and more technical engineering of the actual technology. But I know that the kind of different industries and the global tech giants are racing to lead in this field. So probably those problems will be overcome. There are kind of more practical problems for us as researchers implementing tools like conversational AI, voice technology, even kind of playing with those things just from participants' experience perspective. But I think those are kind of the main things.
So there's so many problems, but with problems are opportunities. But yeah, a couple of things that really stand out for me is creating a digital version of yourself in the metaverse. Do you own that? Beyond that, is it you? The behavior of the person who's in the metaverse, can you argue that that's not you? We're talking about digital twins, so are you essentially creating another legal person? And as more people, and legal person is a terminology that is being used to describe you and I, a legal person. Will they be judged on their behaviours differently, or will I be judged as the person who owns that? So I think there's a lot of interesting conversations around you and this other person. Are you one? Are you different? The other thing is, I think, obviously, because what's going on in the metaverse is so exciting, as with anything exciting, right? We want to use it, we'll explore it, we'll play with it. But actually, are there other things that we can do that, like I touched on my presentation that I hear today? So one example is I worked with Zappy for a fizzy drink brand at one point, and we did what we saw with Jennifer's talk, but not with a synthetic person, just because I was showing an example of the idea that I had. I filmed my husband asking questions in a video, and so you would respond to that and then more questions. And that was just very lo-fi, you know, just taking a video, but that being, you know, the follow-up questions kind of being prompted and things like that. So do you need any more to get to the point of that engagement or that data quality and things like that? There are more problems, but I'll pass it on to Sharon.
I came here today thinking, like, what kind of data can I collect on the metaverse? And unfortunately, nobody replied. And I think it's a great opportunity to you know, maybe announce a desk of surveys, like someone I know well did a few years back. Because it is an opportunity to capture real behavior. The danger, we know it. It's like a massive Cambridge Analytica where all of a sudden we can manipulate people. So yeah, so that's for me, that's the main problem. And the energy bills.
Yeah, I think that energy bills point is a really, really key one. I'm going to come back to the truest thing that was said today. And for my opinion, the truest thing came from Ali earlier today, which was the two things that are priorities are faster and cheaper. Better doesn't make the list of the top two things. For a lot of these techniques, with the tools we have, it's not faster to create an engaging, conversational, synthetic interview in the metaverse. It's faster to do a horrible survey out and pay people $2 to do the survey. It may not be good, it may in fact be shocking, but it is faster and it's cheaper. So I think the biggest challenge for almost everything we saw today is actually how do we make it fast enough and cheap enough to be able to get beyond just the essential core things where people come along and say, well, I can't do it any other way, so I will do it this way. If we want to break out of that, it's got to be faster and cheaper. So, coming back to the nice part of the sandwich, and we're going to start again with Jerome. What do you think is going to add what you saw today? What's going to work well in the next 5 years?
Gaming and pornography. You know, it's... that... No. That's going to work well. Now, that's my prediction. Now the jury's out for the rest. You know, like, are we going to work in a multiverse? I don't see it happening. You know, we might connect. Maybe it's going to be better than Teams. We got to find something better than Teams. But you know, I don't expect too much from the whole thing.
So, completely agree with Jerome. I heard somebody say once, if you want to know what the future of tech is, just look at what the porn industry are doing. Because, yeah, there are so many other factors there. But we won't dive on. That's another conference for another time. What was the question again? Good things that are going to work, yes. So, I think that sometimes when something like the metaverse is dangled over researchers, actually that highlights to us how big the gap is between what we're doing today and actually where we could be. So actually, I think in a weird way, this is going to push us up the ladder a little bit more and start thinking about participant engagement more broadly. And although, Ray, I agree with your point in many ways about how actually people want, you know, surveys cheap and fast, it's not about better. There is a cost to the low engagement of those horrible surveys. So one client I consulted for had a 3-stage survey, stage 1, stage 2. The drop-off between stage 1 and 2 would cost them per study thousands of pounds. So that was the cost of the drop-off of that low engagement. So I think more people are going to be paying attention to creating those research experiences so participants are engaged, and through that there is a saving because you're not sending out more survey links and you're not sending out more invitations, and you're saving time in field because actually the study is getting done and that kind of thing. So that's an opportunity there.
And I was actually very pleased by Jennifer's talk, because this is exactly what I see, the trajectory of how things might pan out. As in, currently some of us have been adopting things like conversational AI, playing with chatbots for research, and also voice technology, kind of programming Amazon Alexa, trying out Google Assistant. So those two might merge together and we might do, voice bots. And then if those guys will need to kind of come into the metaverse, they will become embodied in some sort of avatar form. So we will have digital assistants, and that already roam the metaverse in form of digital humans. So we might be programming those digital human form, virtual humans who do not have a representative, a real kind of physical person, a representative in real world. But we as researchers might be programming those, and there are already great advancements in real-time video synthesis, where you can just film someone for like a day or a couple of hours in front of a green screen, and then AI would learn how that person moves and how the mimics, and then you would be able to program for that person to say whatever you kind of type in, so kind of text to video stuff. And of course, there are some ethical implications of this stuff. But I do see that this might be where our industry is going with that.
So I think there are several positives, which I'm going to add to the list there. I think the first one that's fairly obvious is usability research. If you're trying to research the new handle for the Black & Decker, and you want to look at that in several countries, or as one of my clients, the tractor manufacturer, and they want to do research in Africa with people who drive tractors in different parts of Africa, that is really appealing for that to be, and that is really virtual reality, not just the augmented sort, but that's a really good place for a whole variety of things like that.
You need the experience, and you don't have it by just having...
Yeah, no, at the moment, they send them a photograph. Yes. So it's a whole lot better. And you know what, the photograph, you get a photograph, I think people send these on channels, and then it turns out to be not as big or whatever, all sorts of issues like that. Yeah, one or two chortles in the audience.
Testing the power tool, because it works really well. There could be accidents.
Oh, it's still going to be better than sending the photographs or the written descriptions. And the area that I'm interested in, I really look for, I do a lot of running. I mean, a lot of running. It's getting 2,500 miles this year so far. So I look at rucksacks and bags, and I would be fascinated to look at those in virtual reality and try them, and to get a sense of whether or not they were likely to work. So usability testing. The second is representative quantitative samples. Do you know what? If you are trying to do the research of who goes to Balenciaga in virtual reality metaverse, the only place you can sample those people representatively is in the metaverse. So everybody who's running an online experience of any description, that research is better conducted there than anywhere else, because that is the population. All of a sudden, you've got the right population. So I can see that being really useful. And I'm going to add my voice as well to chatbots. They're already growing immensely. Some of them are like super clunky, but it's a direction of travel. I think we will definitely see conversational AI being quite significant in the next 5 years. So that's what we thought was going to be really good. We've got a few minutes left. So anybody here going to do something different as a consequence of being here today? Who's going to put their hand up and say, you know what, I'm going to try that? Come on, be brave. Somebody, yes. You might need to come a little bit.
So So I'm working on a project with someone here in the audience, and we want to visualize. We were like on a project to visualize some results in a dashboard, but we were thinking, like, can we use the metaverse and build something that we can make the impact of our results more impactful to the client, so that the client goes in the metaverse to experience the results of the research in a much more compelling and way that he will remember based on, because it sticks better to memory.
I think it's a great idea. A few years ago, I saw a presentation from physicists who were talking about they'd created a virtual reality model of the phenomenon they were researching, and they were walking around looking at the radioactive decay, double beta neutrino decay, and looking at it happening. And you could imagine how we could do that for all sorts of research results. If it was a continuous study, then we can make it cheap and fast. You wouldn't want to do that for an ad hoc study with the tools around. But actually, maybe you could do something really quite sexy for that in terms of allowing the smarter clients, so again, it's a niche, to be able to go in and investigate the data that sort of way. Anybody else going to do something differently as a consequence of today? Matt?
Oh. Yes, I am. Yes, I'm going to connect with Ali, and I'm going to see if I can convince any of our clients to incorporate some extended reality and virtual reality in some of what they do. That's what I'm going to do.
Data collection? Or
data collection, yes.
Visualizing?
Visualization? Well, I mean, are people that bothered? Do they want to see charts going up and down in an interactive environment?
People want better visualization. I was very interested in the person who's talking about. Sorry. Very interested in the lady that was mentioning, presenting the data in the metaverse. One of the things we face is presenting these deeply boring cluster diagrams. It's like nobody's interested. I want to do it in 3D. I'd like to do it in real life in 3D. If I can do it, it just struck me, if I can do it in the metaverse, even better. People really want better ways of understanding data.
Just to add to that, if you want to take away one thing today, if you want to do some research and connect your client with your consumers, take a 360 video camera, stick it in their home, edit it, get them to put a headset on and go, now sit with the buggers and find out what they're like. I did that with ITV. It's a revelation. Seriously, if you want to get people to connect your clients to your audience, that's probably the best thing you can do.
So one of the things I'm going to do differently is I've got the Facebook Meta tools for virtual reality, but I haven't got a HoloLens. Will next week. So I'm certainly going to buy one of those. And I'm just going back to this data point. Imagine that you're talking about a cluster solution, segmentation. Imagine as a client, you can walk around and open the door to segment hedonists, as in put their clothes back on, see several people who are typical of that, and then choose one, and using conversational AI, say, now what sort of brands do you like? And they can talk back to you about the sort of brands, and why do you like those sort of brands? And if they don't know the answer, you can even route that question out to see if somebody can supply the answer in the way that some of the really fast feedback check systems now do that enable you to do that, to add to the data, so next time you will have an immediate answer with those synthetic consumers. I'm still not sure about the word synthetic, though. Sympathetic, maybe. Anybody else want to chime in with one more thought? Otherwise, I'm going to hand the conch back to Matt after a big... Oh, sorry.
So, love what you just said, but do you need the metaverse to do that? Do you need the metaverse to have a client and see their data kind of come to life in that way? There might feel like an element of, well, I can kind of talk to them and go around them, but you can do that with so much other so many other software platforms that are probably more accessible to clients than sending them all headsets and controllers and things like that?
Most people, let's not just say clients, do not have the skills to interrogate data sets. I've always made a good living at being able to go to people's sites and investigate the data they already have for them because I'm better at it than them. What we're looking for is a method of getting more people able to interrogate, and if they can simply ask questions, and AI is helping work out what the answers are, that will open the door rather than trying to find brighter customers all the time. Matt, this has been a fantastic conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray.